What's up, headbangers? On today's episode, I'm spinning the waps with Debbie Go of Harriet, and we're listening to Oathbreaker's emotionally shattering album, Rhea. Don't go anywhere, it all starts right now. How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to Spinning the Wax. My name is John Garcia, aka Stay Puffed, the metal marshmallow, the heaviest mallow in the galaxy, and your friendly neighborhood headbanger. Today, we're going to be diving into an emotionally crippling album by Belgium's Oathbreaker with Debbie Go, the guitarist of UK modern metallic hardcore band Harriet. Debbie is just an absolutely lovely human being, and her laugh is going to infect you with the giggles throughout this entire episode. I swear, I had a smile on my face the entire time I edited this thing. But despite that, she has a dynamic voice that could knock grown men unconscious, in addition to being one of the finest young guitar players in the music scene today. Debbie has brought Oathbreaker's 2016 album Rhea, which is just a raw and inspired piece of extreme music. It is not an easy listen by any means, given that the lyrical content deals with death, estranged parents, and the loss of childhood innocence, but it taps into emotions more so than most other releases of this ilk, which are not many. It's black metal by way of hardcore that's produced by Jack Shirley of Deaf Heaven's Sunbather fame. Debbie talks about how this album influences her approach to writing music, as well as how Caro Tong's vocals showed her how to utilize soft, clean voices in heavy music. She also discusses seeing the band live for the first time, how true crime influences her lyrics for Harriet, and how the band has been grinding in the underground for years ahead of their highly anticipated debut album, Devoured by the Mouth of Hell. So, without further ado, please welcome my next guest to Spinning the Wax, Debbie Go.
Oh, thank you, mate. Really, really chuffed to be here. Honestly, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I know because we had chatted a while ago, you, me, and the lads, who hopefully one of these days I'll get on this pod too. This is about when Profound Morality came out, which, if you can believe it, which I'm sure you can't, is like fucking 2 years ago. And I don't remember if we talked about this or not, because I said that I was going to be at Download when y'all opened the fest in 2022. And I
Yeah.
was not quite front row, but I was right there. And it was amazing to see the turnout for that, the look on all of y'all's faces looking out in the crowd, and just like you could tell how special it was for you and how much you were soaking in the atmosphere and everything like that. And now the band is still kicking ass and getting ready to put out their debut.
Yeah, I can't believe how much time has passed since Profound Morality, because in our heads it feels like yesterday, but also weirdly like a million years ago. It's so strange how time has that impact on you. Um, but yeah, Download 22 is still one of our favourite shows ever. And I
Mm.
don't think that I think Profound Morality was out actually. It's hard to remember,
I,
but
I I do think it was, but maybe only for
yeah.
like a couple of weeks or something like that. But I'm pretty sure it was. Don't ask me because I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it was.
It was. I'm remembering it better now. It was out. But yeah, that show was crazy, and yeah, thank you for being there for that show,
Yeah.
because that was a really good one for us.
Y'all have been grinding and playing and gigging and doing everything across the UK for many years. I mean, since before the pandemic even.
Oh yeah,
And,
yeah.
and now it's just like, can you like put those 2 years in perspective for us, I guess? Because like you said that time has gone really fast, but you've gone from, this kind of like stealthy, quiet, sneaky band to now one that I hear all of the time. People like, where's their debut? Where's I want more Harriet? Let's go. How does that feel for y'all as a band to have those kind of like expectations before, even really getting started?
I think for a band like us to have had the last couple of years that we had is just mind blowing, and we're so grateful for it. I was kind of thinking about this before um, this interview today, and that being in a band is just such a huge honor, but to be able to be in a band and to feel as though um, you have a shot of maybe taking a little bit further than what you previously imagined is just such a huge privilege. Even though obviously there's a big grind involved with that, it's still such a privilege to be able to give it a shot. And the last couple of years have definitely just been surreal for us. We're a band who are used to playing to not very big crowds not that long ago. We've all done this for years and years, although on the surface it might not seem as though we've been around for a long time. We've spent years playing to nobody, and to be able to feel as though we have an active audience now is just such a joy.
Yeah, and then on top of that too, as well as I know that you yourself, you're a Jackson artist now, and like Marsh. Are you a Marshall artist as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so like that's I mean, I love seeing people in like the wider industry also have their eyes on like, you specifically and how good of a guitar player you are and like the band as well because and we've talked about this before and I'm sure I'll gush about it later, but I mean, just Harriet brings something so different that I think no band really does, but fits on so many different bills or in so many different like genres or anything like that. And I just think that it's so cool that y'all are after grinding for so long, are getting the recognition now, and like people are seeing like, oh fuck yeah, like she could play guitar, she could scream, Jake can fucking like play that bass that's gonna like rumble foundations to the
Yeah.
ground. Like any demolition expert now doesn't need dynamite anymore. They just need Jake to plug his bass in
Yeah.
and just bah.
He's such a powerhouse. His bass tone is just unreal. It feels like the end of the world.
We're here to listen and hang out to an album and gush about Oathbreaker. So you have chosen Rhea, the 2016 album from this band. They haven't come out with anything else since then, which I know myself and so many other people are like, please come back from hiatus, new Oathbreaker now. But
Mhm.
why, Debbie, do you love this album?
I just think, for me personally, it's just a perfect blend of everything that I love about heavy music and abrasive music because it is just so devastating. It's such a depressing and yet very deep listening experience. I feel like it's, for me, one of the most immersive albums that you can listen to because the emotion in it is just so raw. Especially the atmospheres that they've have been able to make as well. The blends of um, really pretty acoustic guitars and ambient kind of sounds amongst this like horrible black metal ugliness is just crazy. This is probably one of my favorite albums of all time.
Well, yeah, and immersive is a great word for it because, I mean, like you can hear the anguish and the pain just in the vocal delivery, but then when you start peeling away and digging into the lyrics, you're like, holy fuck, somehow that sounds even worse when you know what the words are than like what it sounds like when Caro's screaming. And I didn't really put this together until I was, re-listening to this album and prep for this interview and everything like that. But is it fair to say that this album, this band is a really huge influence on Harriet, if not you specifically?
Yeah, myself and Jake are really big Oathbreaker fans, and we have been for a long, long while. But definitely the way that they blend black metal and atmospheric bits has been a big influence on us. I think this album is one that me and Jake talk about quite often.
Yeah, and Caro's vocals as well too. And I don't know if this is just like in hindsight and stuff like that, because obviously I've listened to Harriet a lot more over the past few years than when I first heard this album. But going back, it's certainly like, oh yeah, I can definitely see maybe some things here and there, or like
Mhm.
techniques, or like that Debbie's picked up to try and use. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think she's got such a unique, clean voice as well as her screaming voice. I think the blend of the two is well, both of them are as unsettling as one another, which I think is really, really cool to have from a clean vocalist. Having unsettling cleans is just so um, such an unexplored area of heavy music. I feel, although that
Yeah.
sounds maybe far-fetched. I really don't think it is. I think metal quite often has a blend of um, really nice cleans and then really ugly screaming, but it's not often that you see the two put together in the way that Caro does. So that's definitely something that I've tried to inherit for Harriet.
All right, so without further ado, let's dig into this, Debbie. This is Oathbreakers Rhea. And just speaking of like creepy vocals and like horror movie soundtracks, it's kind of a really interesting start to this album.
Yeah, I love it for the intro. I think it's so cool for a metal album to start in this way. And even like I think those are like swells on your like guitar, but it sounds like a violin almost. I
Yeah.
think it's just a volume swell, but
Do you know any of like the background or anything like that with them?
yeah, I think I could be wrong because truthfully I haven't looked into this album for a while lyrically.
Sure.
I think it's about loss, isn't it? Didn't she
Hmm.
lose somebody very close to her?
I've got the lyrics up because there are just parts of this album where, oh my god, it's just poetry.
It's so crazy when you like look them up because I can see so vividly some of her lyrics. Like I can see the scene happening, and then knowing what it's about, I think that's so crazy that she was able, or the band was able to make this album from it. It's something that I would love to make an album like this about loss if I could encapsulate it in these terms.
So now we're into Second Son of R. Oh my god, just like that furiosity, that black metal. Again, that juxtaposition of going from that croony, spooky, soft intro right into like, okay, we're in the shit now. Like, we're barely
Yeah.
5 minutes into the album and already we've covered so much ground.
I think it's so cool how the two tracks like relate to each other as well. Of how even though they're two separate tracks and they like bleed into each other, it's such a amazing first big chunk of the album to be like, this is what it's about. This is what we're coming here to do. I think it's so cool.
When you listen to this album, had you previously listened to any Oathbreaker albums?
So I saw them back in I think 2013,
Okay.
and they were playing with Welsh Sleeps and Canspats.
Oh, wow,
And I'm
that's a wild. That's a
I
such a like
know.
different bands.
I was quite young at the time, and maybe I was into like thrash and like metal and maybe bits of hardcore and things like that, but I had
Hmm.
never ever been introduced to black metal. And I'll be like so honest because it pains me. They were too much for me that show. I didn't get it. I really didn't get it. I was like, what is this? Oh my gosh, because Cara came on and she was all in white, hair over her face, and she was barefoot. And I was like, what is this? Oh my God. She's like, is she okay? Like, I'm so remorseful because I never got to see them ever again.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I had heard of them before I dived into this album. I just wish that I knew I'd listened to them before that show or I'd gotten into black metal at that point.
But
Because yeah, never
that's
saw
that's
them
part of the
again.
journey, though. Like, I love that because sometimes you hear things and you're not ready for it. Like, I was never a Mastodon fan when they first came out. Like, a buddy of mine was like, "Oh, you got to listen to this new band. Here's a record called Leviathan." And I listened to it and I was like, "Yeah, I don't think so. Like, I'm gonna stick with my Maiden and my Metallica. I don't get it." And then like a couple years later, I was drinking with my cousin. Is like, "No, no, no, no. You need to listen to Blood Mountain." And we listened to it together, and it was like, holy shit, like it clicked finally. And this being like your first intro to extreme metal, especially with like While She Sleeps and Cancer Bats being the other two bands on there
Yeah.
that you're going to see, I could definitely see like it takes a second to, because this isn't an immediate band, I don't think, unless you're already into extreme music. It's like,
Yeah, I feel like you can't dip your toe into this kind of music. You have to be fully into it already.
yeah, and I was curious because I had actually not listened to their previous two albums until the last couple weeks while I was prepping for
Mm,
this, because I always go back to just to this album. It's like, if I'm going to listen to Oathbreaker, I'm going to listen to Rhea. But it
mhm.
was really interesting to see them just in those three albums, how much they've evolved from just like hardcore band to, okay, now we're
Mhm.
hardcore with just like a little bit of metal and stuff, to now we're introducing like so much black metal and extremity in it.
Yeah, I really like their previous albums to this because I feel like they're a little bit guess bits of it are almost a little bit thrashy and doomy. I think that's so cool that actually, like, this album's definitely more of a soundscape, although there's definitely big riffs in it. But
Mhm.
I think their older albums are quite like riffy, whereas this one is like more immersive. I keep saying that word, but it, yeah, I just feel like this is a almost like a little bit of a concept album because you have to listen to it all. Like, I feel like you can't just listen to one song off this album. You have
I
to do the whole.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Speaking of like right now, this part that we're in, this gorgeous, clean guitar, and her voice again, kind of reminiscent of that intro, peeling back those layers and getting back. And it's one thing that I love with either my concept albums or really just my bands when there's a little bit of space to breathe in albums,
Yeah.
whether that's like some atmosphere or something like that, which is not to say that I don't love a, 30-minute dumb as rocks death metal album or something like that, right? But when it comes to album time, this type of stuff is being able to, make the heavier parts even more impactful from just stripping it down a little bit.
Even like the vocal delivery here is crazy. It's because she could have, she could have put lyrics here, but like it just being screaming is so fucking hard. It's the hardest thing ever.
Yeah.
It's like a horror film. It's just so fucking cool.
Yeah, and it just conveys exactly what she wants to convey more so than any words could,
Yeah. And then like this coming in straight after, the like cleans over a black metal bit is so cool. I love this kind of stuff, but I always think it's really interesting when the vocals are clean over a really heavy bit. I think that's such a cool like juxtaposition of writing heavy music. I think they did like a mini documentary about this album, and I think bits of it were recorded on like actual tape. I can't recall whether that means that some of it was like one tape or whether it was just to get that kind of older sounding tone from it. But I thought that was really interesting how they chose that path.
I did know, and I'm sure that people already familiar with this album already will know, this was produced by Jack Shirley, who, of course, did Def Heaven's Sunbather, which is, a formative album and just such a pillar in the genre. And I think we have to give Jack Shirley credit in this, especially listening to the previous album to this one, just what he was able to bring out of this band, both audio-wise and in their performance, is I think one of the reasons why this is just such a statement record, because he knew what he was doing and he knew what he was working with. And I mean, I don't think that you can look over a good producer's ability to really bring out the best in the musicians that they're working with.
I think it's really interesting. I'd forgotten about the fact that he did Sunbather as well, but I think they have similar vibes of, although this album feels to me a lot more devastating. I just think the cleans in metal is so cool when they're not like, I sound like a real battle jacket bloke here, but I think it's cool when they're like not just like pop vocals put in a metal song. Whenever that happens, I'm really sorry to say it, and I'm really sorry, but I just kind of switch off because I just think can't we keep it all metal?
I wrote down the term battle jacket bloke. I think that might be the title of this fucking episode because, like, holy shit.
No hate to them. I mean, like, I'm merely leaning on the reputation.
Yeah,
whether that's true or not, I don't know.
But like, I get what you mean, because I think that there's certainly a lot of like, I don't even want to say like modern metalcore, but I like the zeitgeist, like the copies of the copies of the copies of the bands that want to be architects, like, where they just, it's basically pop music, but just with a little bit of heavier guitars and stuff like that.
I think maybe like in like talking about it more, I think maybe my like grievance with that kind of thing is once one band does it, every band wants to do it.
Yes.
And I think there is maybe like quite an obvious route, or it's like quite evident when a band starts to go that way what their intentions are. Not that that's an awful thing. Like, hey, everybody is out here just trying to do their thing. Like,
yeah,
I'm not about to hate there, but I just think being able, or at least attempting to try and make your own band something unique is always the approach that I've kind of had with it.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where that feeling comes from, is like, wow, can't we just try and think out the box a little bit? Like sometimes, just because it's boring listening to the same kind of songs all the time.
To your point as well, I think that also, like, as a listener, you know, the idea of like wanting to be, you know, you're talking about unique, but also just like genuine and honest and
Yeah.
truthful, right? Because I think as a listener, you can definitely tell when there's a band doing something because they just want to do it or think that they should do it versus like,
Hmm.
oh no, we're going to do this, but it's because we really feel this. And you can definitely tell the difference between those two approaches to music, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like going back to this album, that's why this album is so cool. Like this bit,
This is
it's
the doom that you're in, like
yeah,
the doom with
yeah,
the sludge. And,
yeah.
oh my god!
It's so sick of having like doomy black metal. That's so cool. And the fact that it like still manages to build and build and build is so cool as well. Like the layers just
Mm.
keep building.
With how extreme the first song was and how the first half of this one is, getting to this with these chords going through there, again, it just makes it feel so much more impactful because they're using all of these pieces. And I love what you said about building, and that again gets into why I kind of think that I would consider this a concept album, because you build from
Mhm.
the very first track all the way to the end, and this album does that to a T.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I think the moods change with it as well. Like this track coming up, this is probably one of my favorite tracks on the album, just because it feels like a little bit of a breather, but it's still so sad. um, it's still on the same narrative of what the other songs are, but it's just a different mood to approach it with. I'm really getting all like fairy tale-y with this, but I just think this album is so good.
No, and that, and I love it, and that's why I wanted you to choose an album that you can just like gush about.
I listened to it in the car on the way home, and I was already like, I can't wait to wait and listen to this again.
I forgot to tell you this actually. A week or so ago, I went to go buy. I just went record shopping because money's been really tight this year, and I haven't gone. I was just like, fuck it. Like I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna pick up some things at the record store, whether used or whatever. I found this in the used pile for $16. I don't know what fucking idiot gave this away to the record store, but I got it back. I should have brought it up with me or anything like that, but I was like, it was just so interesting because this is after we'd already like finalized the interview and everything like that, and then
Mhm.
just like a couple of days later, I was in the record store and just happened to see it, and I was like, yoink! Thank you very much.
Ah, you know what? That's so fucking cool. That's so so cool. I have like a similar not experience with this. Of like, I'm not really a record collector, and there's a really cool store in Birmingham, like an independent store, and they have so many cool bands. And they had Brutus Burst, and I said to my boyfriend, "Oh, imagine if they had like Oathbreaker or something." And I didn't even have a vinyl player, and then they had this album, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Bought them, and then for a good 3 or 4 years, until my boyfriend moved in with his vinyl player, I haven't been able to
Well,
listen
that
to
was
it.
the
But
stipulation, and it's like, okay, we can move in, but the vinyl
yeah,
player
yeah,
has
bring
to
the
come
vinyl
first.
player.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just reminds me of like a rainy, horrible day.
Yeah, you could just hear that pick off the acoustic guitar. It feels like the strings are
Mhm.
just slightly rusted just a little bit, which is somehow perfect for the vibe of this album.
Mhm. These chords over the top at the moment are so cool because they're almost like a bit bluesy
Mm,
and a bit like almost like surf rock kind of vibes. I just think it's really cool that
interesting.
they thought to put that over the top with the trem and like bending the note down. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, and these lyrics too on this one, just hand out your troubles, give me your pain, I'll plant them next to the thorns in my veins. Like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Mhm. Yeah, this is when I'll be driving and I'm like, hand out, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a nighttime song, or like a
Yeah.
fog song or something like that, you know. So this little part right here kind of gets back into that, like, you know, that croony clean vocal part that you
Hmm.
were talking about. So, and I don't think that we talked about this previously before. Like, I know that you came from a musical family, and like your dad was very instrumental into getting you into the music and stuff that you're into now. But like,
Hmm.
when did you first start like discovering your singing voice, and then when did that kind of evolve into you wanting to take on like screaming and harsh vocals and stuff like that?
I think I started to play around very privately with singing when I was 19 or 20, just to see whether, don't know, to see whether I could do it kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I left it alone quite a lot until lockdown came. And then Harry were like bouncing demos over to each other. And because I guess I wouldn't have had the in-person rejection, I put some clean vocals down, which I think was Profound Morality. I think that was the first
Okay. Wow.
one that I did put clean vocals down to. And yeah, the guys were like, "Nah, let's do this." um Screaming, also similar age, 1920. I sometimes did backup vocals, but the reason doing it for Harriet was that Jake had lost his voice one day, and we kind of joked. It was honestly a joke, like, "Oh, go on, Deb, go on." And I was like, "Ah," we were ha 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 ha. And then, yeah, most of my vocals ended up being the vocals on Cleanse Existence, and then it just went from there. I set myself up, man.
I
Because
love
now I got to be a
that.
vocalist.
It's a happy accident. That's incredible. That reminds me, you mentioned them at when you're talking about the record store. Brutus was the exact same way. Like Stephanie never I mean,
Yeah,
even to this day, she never wanted to be a vocalist, I think, which is crazy given her
yeah.
vocals and everything like that. But like, I'm glad that not only even if it was like for a laugh or a joke or whatever, that your bandmates kind of supported you and like did that, but then we're also like, no, wait, this is too good. We have to keep doing this, and gave you that space to grow and learn and discover yourself and everything like that. That's fucking cool.
Yeah, they're still really, really cool with that. I've only started singing in front of them to record so recently with this album.
Hmm.
It's still really new. Obviously, I've played guitar for most of my life, and that's my main thing. It's strange to be behind on an instrument
Hmm.
that you're performing with, because I don't have the years of being a vocalist like I do with guitar.
That voice crack right there, I love it.
Yeah, the voice cracks on this album are also another thing that are just so amazing for conveying the emotion. I think this vocal hook is like my favorite of the whole album. When I think of this album, I think of this bit, this like section.
Sounds like she's almost about like ready to cry through those vocals,
Yeah. I feel like it's so direct as well what she's saying, whereas a lot of the other lyrics are like maybe shielded a bit more. This one's quite upfront of like what she's speaking about.
Yeah. This is one of the direct songs about her grandma, because it starts with how I envision you, or how I envision this time with you in a half-lit hospital room, and then this part
Yeah.
she's singing right now. I'd love nothing more than to hear your withering voice. How could you go on without me? It's just like, anybody who's lost anybody and just like lump like right in the throat
Yeah,
right now
yeah.
hearing it.
When I first listened to this album, I hadn't really gone through anything like that, and now listening back, I feel like I understand it so much more, which yeah.
Which I think speaks to both the power of music and just the timelessness of this album. And I've talked a
Yeah.
lot about this with people I've interviewed so far, and this will be a big topic through this podcast throughout. But just being able to grow, and you listen to albums completely different 10 years from when you first heard them. Like I'll still get the same feeling sometimes, whether it's just like that, like I want to run really fast or like jump out of a plane or something with some albums. But you're right, the way that you understand or interpret lyrics a little bit more with just that, you know, it just comes with age, maturity, and experience and everything like that. I think that it's just like a mark of a really well done piece of art when it can change and grow with you.
Yeah, I think that's something that I like latch onto so much is like in it. The riff here is so cool.
Yeah, I'm listening. Don't mind my
Sorry.
steak face, but I'm listening.
No. Also, the way that this ends is so cool because it's a fade out, but it's like this horrible distorted soloed guitar, so that's like inaudible. I don't know whether I'd ever like picked up on that before, but that's so cool. I wish we'd done that. I want to do it.
next album.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this like kind of like this white noise. I know that there's some bands that will end albums like this, you know, or like
Yeah.
they'll turn up it really loud till it feels like your ears are gonna burst. Which I
Yeah.
have thoughts and opinions about that, but doing this in the middle of an album is like
Yeah.
I feel like this could be a closer depending on like how you sequence things and stuff like that. And I'm
Yeah,
a big
yeah.
sequencing geek, Debbie, but like yeah, and then you've still got half an album to go after this.
This vocal production is so cool as well because it's harmonized, but not in like a conventional way. Like it's really unsettling to listen to.
I lost my shit the very first time that I heard this because it really is almost like it's like you know, in horror movies when like the twins are talking in unison or something like that, but there's just that's what it sounds like.
I think it's so amazing how it builds such a vivid picture, but to me it doesn't, none of it feels cheesy or like too deliberate. Like it being like it could very easily be the soundtrack to a horror movie with like no talking or, you know, like a silent film. I think that's so cool because there's so many different avenues you could go down with that. It kind of speaks for itself. It feels like not that the songs are similar, but like the moods are similar. Of, you know, the bit in Dreamhouse by Deaf Heaven, where it finally like reaches a point. I feel like when this track comes in, it like in a few moments, that's that like lump in your throat. Oh my god, it's end of the world. I'm gonna cry and piss and roll around and
just be a sack of my own fluids for a little bit. Yeah, this is one of those albums that every time I listen to it, I have to just like sit in silence for like 5 minutes or something like that to like regather my thoughts and kind of like get prepared to go out in the world. Because, you know, it really does give your mind a journey, regardless of whether you're in a good mood or a bad mood. And I'm sure that there are some people that may not listen to this album on a regular basis because they have to be in a very specific mood in order to like prep for it. And I'm like that with Amun-Ra a lot. Like I can't just like throw on an Amun-Ra album and, you know, have a good time. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like, you know, light some incense, you know, dim the lights, smoke a bowl, and put it on my record player, like on the big speakers or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with this album it's a 2-hour journey for me to get to band practice, and I always put on an album on the way, obviously. And before, I've turned up to band practice and been so spaced out because I've listened to this album on the way. I've said to Jake before, he's like come to my car to help me get out my gear, and I'm like, mate, I'm so sorry. I've just listened to Rhea. I need to remember how to be a normal person.
We're gonna need to like put on like the Offspring or Sum 41 or something like that, just to like cleanse the palate.
Yeah, I need a vibe refresher.
This, you know, even if you've never heard the song before, you know something is about to happen. You just don't know when. And so that kind of like anxiety, then anticipation, another just like chef's kiss, remarkable songwriting type of deal, like where they're telling you exactly what's going to happen, but it's still a surprise there.
And it's so pretty as well when it comes in, because it's leading to this big what's it going to be, and then it's like beautiful but so sad.
Yeah, beauty is very much an adjective I would describe in this music, which
Mm,
you not through the whole entire thing, but certainly those aspects of it come through, and I think that's what makes it so powerful. Is that yeah, you can listen to a really great extreme, technical black metal album or whatever, and have a great time, but the ones that like really just like leave claw marks on your heart or your soul, are the ones that can I
mm.
don't know, somehow, and like, I don't know if you have any insight to this, but just like somehow pulling out your emotions and putting them into the music. But I think it's so special when musicians can convey and transport that emotion that they were feeling
Mm.
or whatever that they were thinking of in that. And this is all over this album.
Yeah, I can't imagine being able to get it all out of you in this way, like in
Hmm.
such a because it feels really concise as well. Weirdly, although it covers such a lot of different moods, it still feels really concise and like fluent. Even like the piano here, like it's so cool. This one, I always have a really specific image in my mind of like a slow motion, like playground or something. I think it like kicks into that in a second, but I can really, it's so weird how every track I can see such a vivid like thing in my
I
mind.
love that. So what are you seeing? Is this like Terminator 2 Judgment Day playground, or is a little bit more serene?
No, it's definitely Terminator vibes. Um, it feels like before something awful happens. I don't
Yeah.
you know, like if you're watching a like crime series or something like that. I don't know, like feels like something bad is gonna happen. I don't know, or like someone reflecting on their childhood is probably what it's about. And yeah, right,
That would make a lot of sense for sure, because I know
yeah.
that, obviously, part of the lyrics and stuff like that had to do with, like, strained personal relationships to her estranged parents, so that would, like, pop right on the nose. So maybe there's some, like, telepathic musician voodoo going on where just you found that imprint of that memory or something like that on there. Some supernatural wacky woo shit. I love it, Debbie.
I think it's so like I think it's such a bold move to put like playground noises in because it almost crosses like an unsettling vibe
Mhm.
in the context of this album. I think that just makes it even more crushing.
Yeah, it really does, especially if like the artist lost part of their childhood or didn't have a part of their childhood,
Mm,
and it's just like here is that like last little bit of childhood innocence or whatever it is. Because if you're growing up in
mm.
a household that maybe isn't the best for kids, like how long did they have before? The horrors of the world really presented upon themselves. Which again, the more you think about this album, the fucking like more dour and sour and fucking like depressed you get.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, it's just so heavy from all angles, isn't it? It's such a deep listen. I haven't
Yeah.
listened to it through headphones for quite a long time as well, and that's it's such a different experience to listen to it like through speakers or in your car or whatever, because there's so many little nuances that you wouldn't normally like necessarily pick up on with speakers.
Yeah, like
It's
the
really
harmonies or
enjoyable
like
to
that
listen to.
piano and that recent part that we were talking
Mm.
about and all the layerings that they do. Yeah, good production, Jack Shirley and Oathbreaker. Way to go.
Yeah. It's just a perfect album for what it went out to try and achieve. I think it smashed it out the park.
Yeah, I agree, and it's on like, and that's another reason why I'm glad that you brought this up is because I mean, this album is 8 years old now. It's gonna be 10
Mhm.
years pretty soon, and I'm not sure how many people nowadays are exactly familiar with Oathbreaker, given the fact that they haven't been doing a whole lot. And I'm sure if,
Yeah.
but like, so anything to get this album like back in like the consciousness of people to be like, no, like listen to this, and then give them an excuse so that they know if they get back from hiatus and start writing again that there will be an audience, which I think there absolutely will be. But I can
Oh my
also
god, yeah.
understand like if this album was as hard to write as it sometimes is like to listen to or think about, then I can understand maybe not wanting to go back to that well or go back
Yeah.
to that thing for a little while, you know?
That's so true. This album must have been so consuming to write with the themes that are in it. and how honest it is as well. Although I don't know, or not everyone, some musicians wouldn't, but I would love to be able to convey like emotion as honestly and as sincerely as this.
Yeah.
I just think it's so amazing how they've managed to really put everything into it. I know that sounds like cheesy maybe, but I feel like I can fucking hear and see their souls. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, and that gets back to what I was talking about earlier about just being genuine and truthful and vulnerable and all that other stuff, and not,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
yeah.
do stuff because I want to sound like a thrash metal band, and we're gonna have thrash metal bands with power metal core. Like, what if that's what you want to do? That's great, but you still have to do it in a way that like you're bearing yourself out and everything like that. Which again, not every single band needs to do that, because I'm not
Yeah.
asking Municipal Waste to be like, tell me everything about the insides of your soul or anything like that, right? But
Yeah.
for music like this, definitely. And I think even in like, reading your lyrics and everything like that, I certainly wouldn't say like, oh, they're as soul bearing as this album, because few things can be. But certainly there is a lot, and I think it's not exactly apples and oranges, because I feel like Harriet lyrics are a little bit more purposely vague to kind of be able to put the listener in them and everything like that. But certainly there is, when I try and interpret these lyrics, there are things that are, heavy topics, or things that I can see like, okay, this is definitely affecting the person who wrote this in a way. Just like how, I don't know, I'll put it in however I can, but it certainly was something that emotionally affected the person who wrote it.
Yeah. I think it would be hard to listen to this album, at least for a first listen, without feeling like emotionally impacted by it. If you're like somebody who pays close attention to lyrics, but even then, like the actual music is really emotional as
It's
well.
true. And also, I mean, because I didn't read the lyrics the first time that I listened to this album. I just like put on the headphones and went, and it was definitely like, you pick things up here and there and stuff like that. But, I always, whether I'm like reviewing something or just ingesting something on my own accord, I always love to listen to it first, and then second, third, fourth time, then sit with the lyrics and go through, because it's always such a different experience, especially in albums that could be considered concept albums and things like that. But that's the strength of this album, is you don't necessarily need to know what they're saying to be able to feel what they're conveying. And then once you see that and you read them, it puts it in just such a different light.
Yeah, I agree massively. I do the same thing of just listening to it first, and then if I become very attached, then I start to go through the lyrics and the documentaries and all the shebang, and yeah.
So let me ask you a question. It might not have an answer, I don't know, but obviously, as like a creative, I imagine you feel a lot of feelings and a lot of emotions a lot of the time, right? Do you ever get to a point where it's just like you're feeling in such a mood, or you're feeling in such a way that you have to go and like, I'm gonna just try and get a guitar riff out, or I'm gonna write some lyrics or something like that, just to kind of like, I don't know, release the pressure? Or is it just a completely different mindset whenever you're trying to like riff and write and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think when I'm feeling most emotional is probably when when the best writing comes out. And I think sometimes with like playing live, if there's been things to like go wrong, or like, if you've been having a rough time, it feels so good to be able to just go and scream and to
Yeah.
have a justified intention of doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel like when you're being like sincere with your delivery, that's when the best performance or like products of writing kind of comes out, when you create the best thing. Obviously that's not the case all the time, because
Of
I would be
course.
very unwell if I was always
Yeah, right.
every time I wanted to play the guitar I had to be super down and sad. But it's definitely when the best things come out. And I do a lot of writing lyrics wise, or the best lyrics come to me when I've watched like documentaries or like anything TV based with a sinister meaning, or like a podcast, or like anything where I can reflect on like a tragedy or like an issue. That's when I
Interesting.
do the best like writing, because I personally feel like so absorbed by that.
Yeah.
Um, and like even like the language used and stuff like that, I always think, oh, that's a really good way to put it. I can write that down for the future. But a lot of our lyrics have like come around when I've been watching a lot of sad telly or
Yeah, I don't know.
listening to sad
Yeah,
stuff.
I'm kind of the same way. My girlfriend's the same way. She loves spooky true crime, mystery stuff and everything like that. So it's like, hey, how are you gonna, wind down today? Oh, we're gonna watch this like 4-part documentary about this like four, quadruple homicide that happened, and like everything like that. It's like cool.
My boyfriend would probably tell that with the same feeling. He's a very he likes bits of that, but if I was left completely by myself, I would just listen to only that.
Oh yeah.
uh,
Yeah, no, I have a
or
I have
watch
a
only that.
fascination with like bigger cults and stuff like that. Like I've done
Yeah.
like read so many books on Jim Jones and Jonestown and Heaven's Gate and stuff like that. Just so that kind of groupthink is fascinating. So that's kind of like where we cross over a little bit. But again, it's just such a interesting way, like you were saying, to think about the human psyche and to think about like how we think and how those people think and like what
Mhm.
drew people to be that.
That's something that I find like so interesting, that just about like life is like how people take different routes. And uh, like especially with this like album, I really like knowing how other people feel. In like
Yeah,
I like to know the nitty gritty. And I don't do very well with like things that aren't fiction, like things that aren't I don't like fiction based things that often. I
interesting.
tend to prefer things that are non-fiction, just because I feel like it's so much easier to understand if you think
Hmm.
about a real person being in like those scenarios. Which I guess is why I like albums like this. I like feeling in somebody else's shoes better than what I could convey something from somebody else's point of view much better than I would be able to from my own point of view. And I think a lot of like our lyrics are maybe taken from bits of like crossover, how maybe I can see how other people feel that I can like relate to a certain extent, rather than it being an outpouring of like personal tribulations or anything like that. I think it's
Yeah.
much easier to like, for me anyway, to identify when somebody else is going through it and be influenced to write about it from that perspective. Maybe it's a bit wild to say, I don't
No, I think
know.
I mean, you literally have empathy for others and you're using that to think about and frame your art because you're saying that, oh, well, I didn't go through this like really horrible, awful thing, but this person does. And if I were to go through this, this is how I would feel. And I understand how they feel this way and yada, yada. And then you use that to influence your art. Like, we need more of that in the world today. We need more empathy, Debbie.
Yeah, that's always been my way with lyrics. But I would love to, I keep saying it, but I'd love to be able to put it down like in a way that Oathbreaker have, because I feel like that would be so good for the soul. This must have been although really difficult, so good to have it down and concise and exactly what you mean and just delivered in this way. How amazing to be able to deliver a piece of art like this.
And it also kind of forces you to deal with it in a certain way, right? It's almost a
Yeah.
form of therapy because, you have to go back to those times and you have to think about them. And, in a way, I'm sure that, I've never spoken to Caro and, I can only speak of the interviews and stuff like that, but I'm sure that this was a cathartic and healing
Hmm.
album to write, even though it was probably really painful and really hard. And she
Yeah.
probably never wants to go back there again and all that stuff. But then, you just kind of, I always say, like with mental health, you level up, right? Because, like, like me with my anxiety, depression, ADHD, all that stuff, like, you never exactly, like, for me, I've had anxiety since I was a child, right? You never get
Mhm.
over it, but you learn how to deal with it until it gets to a point where, okay, now you have to deal with it again, and then you level up, and then you just keep going. But
Mhm.
there's always another level, and there's always going to be something that you're going to have to deal with. But once you get through that stuff, it comes a little bit easier day by day, at least in my opinion, and in my experience, at least. I know everybody's experience is different.
I think that's a really good way to put it. The idea of leveling up is really, I think that's a helpful way to look at it as well, and a
Mm.
realistic way to look at it. I think that's really good outlook.
This for me is like this is like the morass that you have to crawl through, you know? Like this is that part where it's just like not quite sludgy, we're not quite doomy yet, but some bits of all of that where you just feel like for me, you're talking about the playground and stuff. This, I just have a vivid picture of someone like on the ground, like army crawling through
Yeah,
mud
yeah.
and like sticks and just shit that's holding them back just to try and get to the other side.
I can see that as well. As soon as you started saying that, I could see it in my mind. It feels like someone's just falling backwards. I wonder whether they wrote this all together or whether they like demoed it quite a lot independently and then brought it to one another. I can't imagine writing it any other way other than in a band practice space, but I could be so wrong.
I swear I read that answer, but I don't know what it is, so I'm not going to say whether it is. Someone, staypuffedmetal@gmail.com, if you know the answer. Did Oathbreaker write this all the way through, or did they demo a lot of this beforehand? But like, I agree, even if they had a little bit of stuff to begin with, you're right. There's no way that it became this cohesive without just playing it in a room and like working it all the way through, because it seems like almost every note of this was laid out in like
Yeah.
a specific and intentional way.
Yeah, I think for each for it to build as much as this, I just can't imagine it like being done at I don't know, independently, but I could be so
Or just it
wrong.
came out that
Everyone's
way, just like, yeah, we weren't planning to
yeah.
do this, but here you go. Which, if that's the case, then fucking bravo, way to go. Maybe Oathbreaker should come back after this. You just like end the career on the cap, but no, please do come back.
Yeah.
Don't not
They had
make music.
they had one song called Ease Me after this, which I
Hmm.
really, really liked. And I was so here for more Oathbreaker, but and again that was really like so unique as well.
They had a bunch of different mixes of that, right? If I
Yeah,
remember correctly.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
This is like so my jam as well. These like eerie swells.
Yeah, I could hear it. Devoured by the Mouth of Hell has this through them a lot, which I quite enjoy. And in fact, this reminds me of when I heard Coalescence for the first time. Oh my God, I fucking fell out of my chair just the way that was, because of the juxtaposition of dun 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 dun, have like a second pause and then the ooh, just like, oh my God, holy shit.
I think at the time, I think I said to the guys, "Is it too Oathbreaker?" I literally think I said it like, "Is this too obviously like a nod to Oathbreaker?" And I think Jake was like, "Nah, don't worry." I think it's so like it's also the like maybe like an initial glimpse of like soft singing because these are really beautiful like choir um vocals that you haven't really heard throughout the album until now.
And the way that they're layered too, and this is, I should say, this flew by. We've got 5 minutes left in this track and then we're
Oh
done.
wow.
Yeah. You were talking about those swells earlier on. It does almost sound like those post-metal guitar swells in it, but through
Hmm.
vocals. It's a nice bookend on this album as well.
Yeah. I'm probably being too deep, but it feels like almost like a funeral now. Like I can imagine this being in a church, knowing what the album's about as well.
I could just, like, a Belgian stone church with just like graves everywhere and like one little spire on like a gray, cloudy day.
Yeah.
Talking about bookending, I do also think that you need this track too, or not this track too, but this track also,
Mhm.
given, you know, the last two songs, the kind of like Where I Live, Where I Leave, the
Yeah.
heaviness of those two, and then you just kind of get a moment to, it's still kind of depressing and lowering down, but you just get a second to breathe a little bit to kind of return your brain back to normality for a second.
Yeah. I think it's a nice, like, reflective moment for the album to have. I don't think I'm like this intrigued or like gushy about another album as I am with this. I just think it's such a deep piece of work.
Yeah, it's something that you could listen to 50 times. Like, I'm sure, Deb, that you're probably still finding things about this album that you like, or that lyrics that hit you in a certain way or something like that,
Yeah.
which gets back to just being I mean, you call it a perfect piece of art. I'm not going to disagree with you. And just timeless, though. Like, people 30 years from now will listen to this album, and I can almost guarantee that regardless of where the music is going to be, that this will still have an impact on someone if they're listening to for the first time or the 20th time.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I just don't think it's an album that you can't have a reaction to. It
Hmm.
makes you anybody listen to it has to feel something. Whether that's like, oh, I hate this, or I love this, or oh my
Yeah.
god, this is so sad. Like,
Or I'm scared. I dead turned this off because her vocals are making me scared.
yeah, it pushes you to feel something. I think.
I love that it pushes. Yeah, it is a challenging album. It is a
Yeah,
little bit of a challenge to get through sometimes, but not because it's bad, but just because of how weighty it is. You know,
yeah.
I wouldn't put this on the same realm of like a Requiem for a Dream. Maybe someone would out there, but like that's a movie I've seen it once, Debbie, and I will probably never watch it again. I
Oh,
got
I've
what
never
I
seen
want.
it.
Oh yeah, it is, anybody who's seen it and who's listening like knows. And I know that there are a lot of Darren Aronofsky fans will be like, oh, I love this movie, I watch it all the time, but it's just like I saw it once, fucking tore me up from the inside, and I am good.
Oh.
I never need to experience that again. Congrats, Darren Aronofsky. You made me feel a lot of emotions. I don't want to put
Yeah.
myself through that again. But like I could definitely I wouldn't put this album on that, but certainly there is that heaviness and that like weightiness to it, to where we were talking about having to be in a mood to listen to this sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I've definitely put this album on and had to turn it off before. Not the best like selling point for it, I guess, but I don't know. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes it's the best thing in the world. It's definitely got that like midsummer vibe to it as well.
Yeah, it very
Um,
much does.
I think it was obviously like long before midsummer, but I find midsummer too uncomfortable. I can't get through it. It's too anxiety provoking for me. It's one of my least favorite things in the world. But weirdly this kind of like has similar vibes. I guess I just don't because I've not got the direct imagery with it. It's not so overbearing for me.
And that is that. That just faded out into the nothingness, and then we're just kind of left with our thoughts and the world
Yeah,
and everything
back to
like that.
reality.
Yeah, exactly. Man, that was a lot of fun. I love that album, Debbie. And
Me
I'm so
too.
glad
Yeah.
that you were willing to share that with me and talk about it and everything. Like, do you have any final thoughts? Anything that we haven't talked about or touched on? Or after listening to that, do you have anything that you want to gush about or say again?
I think I've gushed so much during it, but yeah, what an album, man. I wish that I could write something even 10% close to that. I think it's just amazing.
Well, the good news is, despite y'all have, you know, like we said, grinding for years and years and years, Harriet is just getting started. And I definitely think that y'all have a lot of future and a lot of road ahead of you. And just given Profound Morality and given Devoured by the Mouth of Hell, they're just like, I don't know where Harriet goes next or where y'all can go next or anything like that. And that's so exciting because for me as a listener, it's just like the possibilities are endless. I don't know what y'all are cooking up in those brains over there, but it's just like, I really do think, you know, not to, you know, gush on my own or anything like that, but it's just like there aren't a lot of newer, younger bands that I think are as exciting as y'all, just doing everything right as far as show tours, you know, your lovely people, the four of you
Oh.
across the board, and I love talking to you every single time. And it's just really cool to, like we were talking about before, just that momentum swell and going. And I wish you so much success with the debut album. And
Oh, mate,
yeah,
thank you so, so, so much. That's really, really lovely. Thank you. Really
you're very
appreciate
welcome.
that.
So, all right, fuck this emotional bullshit and everything like that. I'll leave it there. I'm never gonna say anything nice to you or your bandmates ever again in your career because I got it all out here.
Very well.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much. I'm gonna stop recording on this one right now, but I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to fucking listen to music with the Yahoo like me, and it's been so great.
Oh, mate, likewise. Honestly, this has been the best. I've really, really enjoyed this. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, okay, that's not true. I absolutely will be saying nice things about Harriet again in the future, including right now when I tell you that you should absolutely check out Devoured by the Mouth of Hell. It basically picks up where their EP Profound Morality left off, but it's even more brutal and varied, utilizing hardcore, industrial, noise, ambient, and groove metal to whoop your ass up and down the block. It's available September 27th via Century Media Records. Go get it in your ears because you won't be able to escape this band for very much longer. Thanks again to Debbie for sharing her time and having an absolute blast with us, being sad and listening to emotionally grating black metal. This is all I have for you this episode, y'all. If you have any thoughts about Debbie, about Oathbreaker, about Belgians, about anything that we talked about on this episode, send an email to spinningthewax@gmail.com. I will read some of your stories about these albums on a later episode in the future. Please give us a follow on all of our socials at Spinning the Wax, and you can follow me personally at StayPuffed_Malo. If you like what you heard and want to support this show, check us out on Patreon and buy me a coffee. If you can't do that, I totally understand. Please give us a share, a follow, a tweet, a like, whatever it is, anything that can help spread the word from us. Tell your heavy metal obsessed friends where they can listen to their favorite artists listening to their favorite albums. But until then, everybody, we will be back next episode listening to Camelot's Epica with Adrian Cowan of Seven Spires. We'll see you next time, y'all. Stay safe, stay sane, stay heavy, stay puffed.